if we do go to hub cities and play, I think they're going to be very, very, very strict on keeping that bubble intact.
This is Rick Westhead on TSN In Depth, and we're joined today by Devan Dubnyk with the Minnesota Wild. Devan is the Wild's NHL player rep. And Devan, thanks for joining us. And do you mind explaining a little bit about what that role means?
Sure. Yeah. No, thanks for having me. I've been doing it for a long time. Actually, I was a rep in Edmonton for most of the years that I was there before I got traded. So I had a little bit of experience with it. And then my first full year here in Minnesota, there was an opening for the head rep, and you know, with the experience that I'd had before, guys asked me if I'd do it, so I said sure. Obviously, during the last lockout, it was a lot of conference calls, a couple times a week, bargaining updates, you know, just different things like that. So there's a lot of time involved, you know, in between then and now. It's more updates, you know, logistical stuff, helping guys out with insurance things, getting them in contact with the right people. You know, unfortunately, now we're in another unique scenario here that involves a lot of phone calls.
What's been the most challenging question that you've had to try to get answered from one of your teammates?
Probably, you know, the most difficult time was that, you know, that April 15th payroll, when everybody's trying to understand what was happening. And I think that was the most difficult part. It was just really getting everyone educated and explaining to guys, you know, what it means to defer this paycheck, what we're looking for, why we want to do it, all these different things. And you know, there was so much going on in the world, so many unknowns with what we were doing. You know, there were a lot of questions from guys about, are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And really trying to explain the reasoning for that. And again, that was early on in the lockdown. So, you know, guys are obviously stressing about the entire situation as well.
To what degree are they stressing about it?
At the start, it was just the complete unknown. I mean, guys were still asking, are we going to play? When are we going to? And this was back in you know, the first week of April with these questions, and you know, now that's ramping up again, obviously, with the playoff format being solidified, and guys are looking for answers for timelines on what things are going to look like. And you know, unfortunately, the answers just aren't there right at the moment. You know, it's the only thing we've got is it won't be before July 10th, which is great, but it doesn't exactly give guys a solid idea of when we're going to be back. And I mean, there's a lot involved. Most guys aren't in town, so there's travel plans involved. There's training phases involved. You know, how do you schedule your training properly to make sure you're where you want to be come whenever that first day of training camp is.
When the NHL announced what the protocols were going to be for this phase 2, when the teams can have small, like limited practices, the media, the headlines seemed to be, "Hey, hockey's coming back." What was your reaction when you saw those headlines, just in terms of whether people might be getting ahead of themselves?
Even just around here, you know, neighborhoods, people I know, everyone's like, "Oh, you guys are coming back now." And I was like, "Well, hang on a second." It was just the format that was agreed on, and I think it's the same thing right now. I mean, it's not get ahead of ourselves. There's a ton of logistical things that need to be sorted out as well.
If the NHL and the PA are both agreed on wanting to come back for this playoff pool, what's the biggest area where they're just not on the same page that they have to bridge a divide on?
I think the biggest thing that's really come up is the family situation, and it's a unique thing because there's no really solid answer right now for what it can look like. But I think guys are pretty concerned. I mean, I've said it, you've seen you know, many other players say the same thing, that they're concerned that they're going to be asked to go away from their families for 3 months.
If every other traveler needs to go into quarantine for 14 days and a professional hockey player doesn't, and does it cross your mind about whether the optics look bad with that?
Yeah, definitely. It was a similar situation with the testing. You know, we talked about if we're gonna come back and have access to this insane amount of COVID tests, it better be available to everyone else in the public as well, or that's just not gonna go over well, and nor should it. So I think that part's been solved now. For the most part, I think they're becoming more readily available to people that need them. But I know they're not. I don't think they're discussing just straight up saying that the guys that don't come back don't have to quarantine. I think they're trying to look at some rules where they're allowed to go to the rink. If they're coming back to train and to skate, that basically, it's in your house or in the rink, and kind of nothing in between.
The phase 2 protocols were announced. One of the things that Gary Bettman said was that he expects that all of the able-bodied players in the league will play. Although, if somebody doesn't feel safe, if they have diabetes or Crohn's or some other issue, it'll be on a case-by-case basis. What about the players whose children or spouses have medical issues? Does this put added pressure on them when the commissioner says something like that?
We've had certain calls with just health experts that the call was strictly to answer health questions and nothing else. But it is that, again, that's going to be a unique challenge because, like you said, who falls into that category, and who's making that decision.
How do you feel about going back? In terms of your long-term health, even your playing career, what would happen if you had COVID and it affected your lung capacity?
That's going to be an important thing regarding disability insurance. And the difficult thing is there's no, this is such a new thing, there's no way to say this isn't going to affect you long term. I mean, one thing they are doing, which you saw in the phase 2 protocols. I mean, when I first read it, I was like, whoa, that's let me go to jail for 4 weeks before training camp starts and get nasal swabbed twice a week. But I mean, I realize that this is what they're concerned about and what they're trying to avoid. So I think if we do go to hub cities and play, I think they're going to be very, very, very strict on keeping that bubble intact.
How can you keep a bubble like this, contained? Who's going to be making the beds in the hotel room where you guys are staying? Who's going to be making your meals? The police who are guarding the entrance, the team doctor, the paramedics who are at your games. Are all of these people going to be locked into the bubble with you for as long as you're playing?
Well, I mean, that's almost the only way to 100% keep it a bubble. And I think that if you look at hub cities, that starts to narrow some places down. I mean, there are some unique areas. You look at Las Vegas as one, obviously, that's been talked. And if you could basically have everybody in one giant hotel, I mean, there's lots of places off the strip, right, that you can almost take over the entire hotel. But like you said, the logistics are give you a headache.
What if the NHL players as a membership vote on this, on whether to come back, and 360 players want to come back and play, and 340 do not? Do you play?
There's an entire legal write-up as to how votes are taken, and how what's a majority, how many votes need to be there. And if that's in the writing, then that's how the votes go. It's not necessarily always a 50-51. Some things that are voted on need to be more than the 51-49. But I mean, if that's what's written and what we agreed on, then I think we'd be in a position where we got to come back and play, because that's we did that one up.
That's interesting, because I'm sure that no one, when they wrote up those rules for your constitution as a union, no one could have conceived that they'd be voting on going back to play and taking on this personal health risk.
Exactly. I mean, there's just so many things that come up where you're like, why was it written that way? What is this? And I mean, it was written that way because for so many different things, because this has never happened before.
Is there a chance that this could lead to some division among players about whether to come back or not?
If it gets to it, and it gets to a position where we're going to go play, I assume that we'll have a good majority of guys that are going to be on the same page. But I don't think it's going to be a 700 plus to 3 by any means.
Are you guys starting to watch your money? And I mean that, I'm asking that because, who knows what escrow is going to be next year, even if you do have a playoff this year. There's a good chance that hockey would go from a $5 billion industry to one that's bringing in half or a little bit more than that.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, it's an important thing, and I think that's one thing that's been talked as well. There's lots of um, discussions with the league, and that's a big part about coming back and playing is like working together to make this not a crazy hit just all next year where guys are ending up in trouble. And the good thing is we have been paid the vast majority of our salaries this year, so it's not like anything drastically changed for us. I mean, we get paid during the season, not during playoffs, and then we get paid the following year.
One of the things I've heard from epidemiologists and specialists is, the prospect for a second wave. I mean, what happens then? Have you heard anyone talk about what the NHL's plan is if hockey shut down again in the fall?
Even if we didn't play this season, the plan was still to most likely extend um, the start of next season anyway, for lots of reasons. One, we want to have the best opportunity to have fans in the stands if at all possible, and the further we can push that start date and have it make sense, the better chance we have of having fans in the stands. And I think at the same time that'll also give us a buffer. If there were to be a second wave, when that time comes, that we're not starting things up at the beginning of October and then something were to happen and we were in a position where we had to shut down again, there'd be that window there where we're going to be able to see if that is the case.
This would give the NHL, if they're able to do this, a chance to try some different things. Without fans in the arenas, maybe we see players mic'd up in ways that they haven't been before. How do you think the game could look different beyond ideas like that one?
One interesting part is some unique camera angles. Having cameras on tracks where they can follow. I can't remember where I was reading this, but where they could almost follow a guy up the ice and watch it, almost like a video game where you watch his exact. You can see the whole ice and watch his skating pattern and how he plays his position. And you could almost have cameras on just about every guy on the ice with the space they'd have, and player track a lot more. So if you have your favorite player, you could have multiple angles that you could watch at. Do you want to see how he moves around the entire rink? Do you want to just watch him up close and see how he's crossing over, or do you want to watch a goalie and really dial in on how he's pushing? I think all these things, if you add these cameras, it's going to be a unique. And I think if we are going to play in front of no fans and viewership is strictly television, that's going to be an important part of it, to add an extra element that's going to really get people to dial in and see something new.